Hello and welcome to Week in Review with me, Jayne Secker. Kevin Maguire and Andrew Secker are here to look back at the biggest stories of the last 7 days. Before we get started, let's get a taste of what the week was all about. Islamic State released a video showing Jordanian pilot Maguire Al-Kasibeh being burned to death. In retaliation, Jordan hanged 2 convicted terrorists and bombed IS-held territory. The US Secretary of State John Kerry and European leaders visited Kiev to try to broker peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. A plane in Taiwan hit a motorway bridge and plunged into the river below. The crash killed 35, but 15 survived. Rotherham Council was branded not fit for purpose in the wake of the child sex abuse scandal in the town, while New Zealand judge Lowell Goddard was made the chair of the troubled Westminster child abuse inquiry. In the same week, Gary Glitter was found guilty of historical sex offences against young girls. What would you ask the leaders? 60 young people grilled prime ministerial candidates on tuition fees, flags and everything in between. In an attempt to eradicate genetic medical conditions, the creation of babies from 3 people's DNA was approved by MPs. And it might be bitingly cold? Well, Jimmy the Groundhog took the phrase quite literally, giving the mayor of Wisconsin a nip and a warning: there's more winter to come.
Not happy. He didn't look happy, did he?
He didn't.
What's that joke about mixing with children and animals? A beautiful politician.
Right.
Not a good
Indeed,
idea.
Indeed.
That'll learn him, you know.
The pictures of the week, though, are really those astonishing pictures of the plane in Taiwan. It looked, to me, it almost looks like it was photoshopped. It looks like a disaster movie, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Something made in a game. It's incredible.
Yeah.
15 people got out alive. Terrible 35 died, but people could survive.
Yeah, I saw it. It was in the office in the background, and I didn't pay much attention because I thought actually it was a video game.
It looks like a trailer for a film or something, doesn't it?
And how heroic of those pilots. And the taxi driver clipped and escaped.
Amazing.
Apparently he passed out with fear at the wheel, which I'm sure I would have too.
Yeah,
No
indeed.
surprise.
Right, let's take a look at the big stories of the week, and really the big one this week, Islamic State releasing a horrific 22-minute-long video showing the Jordanian pilot Maguire Al-Kasibeh being burned alive, trapped in a cage. Well, it drew condemnation from around the world, and a report by MPs found that the UK is contributing less than its coalition partners in the fight against IS. Our defence correspondent Alistair Bunkle has more.
Listening to this,
we will not stop until the murderous ISIL extremists behind this and their poisonous ideology are eradicated.
and seeing this, you would think that Britain is throwing its full weight at Islamic State. But it's not, and it can and should do more, says the Defence Select Committee. The committee draws comparisons with other coalition countries, and they are not flattering. Britain only has 3 military personnel stationed outside of northern Kurdish Iraq, and they haven't yet made any specific pledges to send more. Compare that to 3,000 Americans, 300 Spanish, and 280 Italians. How about weapons? Well, Britain has so far contributed 40 heavy machine guns. But this is what Germany is offering up. Within the list, 16,000 assault rifles, 10,000 hand grenades, 8,000 pistols. Britain is rather more active in the bombing campaign, but even there, British airstrikes only make up 6% of the total. It's not a lot. All in all, this is a rather bleak assessment of Britain's military commitment to what we are repeatedly told is a generational struggle.
Do you think we should be doing more, or are we right to be taking slightly standing back compared to others?
Look, we've been burnt so often here. I didn't want to go into that horrible war in Iraq or that terrible conflict in Afghanistan. The fact we're engaged more in bombing than others, I think, is significant. And Germany may be providing all that military hardware, but they're not putting in any. They're not taking part in any bombing raids. It's very difficult. The truth is, of course, we haven't got any money. And we haven't got much military hardware left. But certainly, the rhetoric of the Prime Minister, which we cheered, is not matched by what we're doing.
I look at that, and I agree. I look at the record. We've been burnt. I think former colonial powers, terrible record in recent wars, going in actually can increase support for the so-called Islamic State. And yes, send in trainers, yes, send in equipment, yes, send in money, but I don't want to see troops there. I don't want to see boots on the ground.
Some talk this week that because the election's coming up, nothing will change. There'll be no change in policy, no change in strategy. on Iraq until after the election. Do you
Yeah,
think that's right, or do you think that shouldn't be a factor?
And there's no way the Labour Party or the Liberals are going to rock the boat either, because nobody, certainly the Conservatives, do not want to see bodies coming back in bags from the latest.
We've got a terrible record. We've got a terrible record. Let's be honest about it. I don't want the position to change. Iraq was an utter disaster in 2003. We broke that country and we helped create the conditions in which the Islamic State has flourished. We bombed Libya and Tripoli, and yes, Colonel Gaddafi was a loathsome figure, but we've smashed that country apart. Islamists are running riot. The so-called elected government has had to flee Tripoli. We can't just go in. You cannot bomb countries into democracy and try and get them to change that way.
But having said that, the Islamic State is the most brutal medieval force that we've contended with, and they do have to be dealt with.
Let's move on and lighten the tone somewhat with our gaffes of the week. First up, it's the Prime Minister's wife, who's come under fire for the company that she works for's tax arrangements. This is Smythson, the posh stationers. She's a consultant.
He's itching to get stuck in on this one, so over to you,
idea. They've transferred their headquarters from Britain to Luxembourg. And let's face it, they haven't done it to pay more tax. It's a bit embarrassing for the Prime Minister as they count their money. You know, the heiress. They used to always play up and said she was a very senior figure in that company. They'll now play her down as a rather minor up.
Is it right that a company like that, which seems a very British company, should do something like that?
They should pay their taxes here. They should pay their taxes, as should Amazon, as should Starbucks, who make horrible coffee as well. They shouldn't go down there. We want them to pay taxes.
I didn't hear the Prime Minister say that about Smythson when he was actually quizzed about them.
Is it Smythson or Smithson's? You go there a lot.
I don't know.
He goes a lot.
You're the one with a £3,000 handbag, not me. You know what I mean?
Lots of gas this week to get through. Next, the President of Argentina, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. She's been mocking her Chinese hosts in the style of a 1970s comedian. She'd gone to China on a visit, tweeted, "Did they only come for the lice and the petroleum?" I mean, that is literally what it translates as.
Who she think she is? The Duke of Edinburgh. I mean, that's what Prince Philip does. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. She's since apologised, but it's too late.
Yeah.
I love the fact that she clearly sends the tweets herself as well. Can you imagine David Cameron having a whiskey too many and sending a vaguely abusive tweet? You can't.
If she had one or two advisors who were sending the tweets, they might have thought twice.
Yes, indeed. Right, the final of our three gaffes of the week, Greg Clark. He's the university's minister. He suggested that students can pay off their student loan quite easily. Same as the cost of a posh coffee a day.
Well, he says a posh coffee a day is £2.20. Let me tell you, Kevin Maguire hasn't paid more than £1 for a cup of coffee for years because he gets the cheap stuff. But actually, posh coffee costs about £2.50 a day, and actually, a lot of students can't afford to buy coffee.
Well, indeed, it adds up to between £60 and £80 a month. You might be able to pay back in your student loan, and that's quite a lot of money. Somebody
calculated it would take them 38 years at this rate to pay off their debt. Funny he didn't say that as he tries to justify that travelling of tuition fees.
You do wonder, these politicians who make these daft assumptions, did they go to university? Because if they did, they might have a better grasp of arithmetic.
Yeah, but I guess it was free in those days, wasn't it?
Indeed.
Onto Twitter. This week, the chief executive has admitted that the social networking company sucks at dealing with trolls and that he's ashamed of how poorly it's dealt with the issue. Our technology correspondent Tom Cheshire has the details.
Abuse can start on Twitter with a fairly innocuous 140 characters, but where it ends up can be shocking.
I think, first of all, people started on my physical appearance. They didn't like the way I looked. Well, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. As long as I do, then I'm happy. But then it became threats. And then, so what I received were sexual abuse threats, threats to harm me personally, threats saying they knew where I lived and they were coming to get me.
Sonia ended up speaking with some of her abusers, but other victims feel their voices are being silenced by the company. CEO Dick Costello has apparently been listening. In an internal email leaked to a technology website, he made an extraordinary mea culpa. We suck at dealing with abuse and trolls on the platform, and we've sucked at it for years. It's no secret, and the rest of the world talks about it every day. But harassment isn't just a problem for Twitter. According to the Pew Internet Project, 40% of all internet users have experienced online harassment. 8% have been physically threatened. 7% have been harassed for a sustained period of time, and young women aged 18 to 24 are disproportionately harassed. Costello has been under pressure from investors for some months now, with some asking if he's the right man to lead the company. This email might have been leaked to remind onlookers that Twitter isn't just a business, but a messy social phenomenon.
What can they do, though? You know,
Well, they're not doing anything.
I know, but what could they do? I mean, they can't change the way people think. It's holding a window up to society, isn't it?
You can block people. Somebody makes a complaint, you investigate it. If that account you can see there's abuse, it can be racist, it can be sexist, threats of rape, violence, whatever, you can block it. You can block the computer from which it's coming.
But it's after it's happened, isn't it? You know, that comment's still come through, the hurt has still been caused.
The worrying thing is now so many police officers now, frontline police officers, are taking up more and more time about complaints to do with social media. That shouldn't be their job, that should be Twitter's job. They're making a lot of money out of Twitter. Yeah, well, that's a cost to us if police are having to deal with that, while Twitter haven't been employing the people who can actually monitor those accounts. There is a thin line at times on freedom of speech, but you can see serial abusers have crossed that line by a country mile. He's the boss of a company that's been raking in the cash and not having a proper area of social responsibility, and they should have some.
OK. Now, time for our quiz. Can you tell us what happens next?
Outside of politics, what experience do you have, what life experience do you have to associate and indicate that you should be the one to represent the people of Britain?
I know. He
they
doesn't.
both know. We'll find out after the break.
No, he doesn't.
Welcome back to Week in Review with me, Jayne Secker, and Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, and Andrew Pearce, Consultant Editor of the Daily Mail. Now, before the break, we asked what happened next. It was standardly counted, you guys know.
Miliband car crash, of which there have been several lately.
He was asked about his life experience before his job in politics. Let's listen.
Outside of politics, what experience do you have, what life experience do you have to associate and indicate that you should be the one to represent the people of Britain?
Well, I've done a number of things which I think, I hope are relevant to this. So I was obviously an economic advisor in the Treasury, and I think that's important. I think that's important because, you know, the economy and how we change our economy is at the heart of the country. I've taught. I taught at Harvard University. I actually taught around government and economics.
So, you know, worked in a shop, flipped burgers at McDonald's.
Yeah, just a regular guy.
Worked in a fish and chip
driven
shop,
a bus.
paper round, pulled pints in a pub like I have.
It's just like having time.
Postal round at Christmas.
I worked in a greengrocer. He just hasn't been. He's not of the real world. But I mean, David Cameron could probably have said, "I polished the family silver." He could have made a joke about it, as could Calamity Clegg. But he's just not.
Yeah, but in one way, he's refreshingly unspun. Because Clegg and Cameron equally have similar backgrounds. What would Cameron say? Well, I left university, got a job with the Tory party after someone from Buckingham Palace rang. Then my mum had a word with somebody and I got a job with a PR company. Clegg would say, well, somebody fixed me up a job in Brussels with Leon Britton.
The trouble is, what Ed Miliband doesn't get is that those pointy-headed answers just make people despair. No. And Kevin says he's not spun. Oh, he is. No, he's just not very good at being spun.
That was unspun.
Well, he was speaking, you may remember, at the Ask the Leaders event. This was part of Stand Up Be Counted, which is a Sky campaign encouraging young people to register to vote. And we did it this week, a day when 16 to 25-year-olds held the party leaders to account one by one. It was good fun. Jason Farrell has more.
It was a first in British politics.
Not quite a selfie, but almost.
Young voters given access to 4 leaders in one day to ask questions face-to-face on the issues that matter to them. For the Prime Minister, the surprise contentious issue was why we lowered the Union flag for the Saudi king.
We don't agree with lots of things that the Saudis do. We don't agree with the way they treat people, for instance, criminals, when we make very clear those differences. But when the king died, as a mark of respect, we thought it was right to show that respect.
But isn't that disrespectful to the people who the Saudi king has sentenced to 1,000 lashes? And you mentioned that there's a relation.
Considering the age of the audience, it was unsurprising that Nick Clegg was attacked on his Achilles heel, tuition fees.
Of course I've apologised for the fact that that particular policy of my party's we couldn't implement. I sometimes wish, I only point this out, I sometimes wish I could hear an apology from David Cameron for not implementing his policy that he promised he would on immigration, or Ed Miliband for crashing the economy in the first place. But there you go, that's the way these things are.
The event was broadcast on YouTube, and throughout the day the leaders also engaged in a Facebook debate, and the dialogue spread across all social media. They want young people to vote, and this was a way of engaging with them on their own turf.
Terrific.
I was there all day. It was
terrific.
very exciting, and I was really impressed by the spread of questions, all sorts of subjects we didn't think would come up.
And let's hope these young people vote too. But I have to say, if Nick Clegg says sometimes he wishes they hadn't done that policy, he must every waking moment.
Sometimes he wants to hear an apology from the other leaders for things they've not delivered on.
And he talked about the Tories on their immigration policy. The reason the Tories haven't delivered on immigration is because those wretched Liberal Democrats in coalition have stopped them curbing immigration. They can't have it both ways.
Yeah. But that day proved that young people are interested in politics. Maybe they want to do it differently to how we do it sometimes. I think leaders fear questions from them rather than from us because they don't know where they're coming from. And that young woman who quizzed Cameron on the Saudis and the flag, well, hope she goes into politics.
Let's hope. Don't wish her a life in politics. Let's wish her a life in something useful and that'll do the country a lot of good.
Come on. Politics is very.
Be a doctor or go. Don't be a propagandist like Maguire.
Politics is very useful because it plays such an important role in people's lives.
You're beginning to sound like Ed Miliband.
An old cynic like you at your age.
Did you teach at Harvard?
You're nice and comfortable. I can see why you don't care. But
who
runs Britain matters to a lot of people.
He's getting more and more pointy-headed.
Right, let's move on to your paper stories of the week. Andrew, we're kicking off with teaching the birds and the bees as well as the ABCs. Sex education for 5-year-olds. This was something Labour were talking about, but Tristram Hunt said he was misrepresented. He was talking about
was he misrepresented?
stamping down.
He was.
Don't they always say that?
The Daily Mail.
Dr. Tristram Hunt, give him his full moniker, used to be on the television, was a TV historian, wants sex education for people as young as 5. He's also saying that teachers who are gay should discuss their sexuality in the classroom, whatever for. Whatever business is it of the classroom, unless a teacher really feels it's relevant, don't put people under pressure to talk about their sexuality. Don't out people. It's not what teachers are for. Teachers who are teaching 5 to 10-year-olds should be teaching about reading, writing, arithmetic. And if they want to talk about sexuality, a bit young. Isn't that a bit young?
5 is very young, but of course primary school goes up to 11.
Yeah.
Kids of 11 know quite a lot these days, that they're, not through school, but what they're accessing. Shouldn't there be a framework that they are at least taught about things in the right way, in a factual way?
Much happier if they're talking about to 11-year-olds. 5 is ridiculous.
A grotesque distortion of the proposal. Yes, it was.
Daily Mail never distorts Labour Party
policy.
Yes, you do.
I mean, look. I mean, at times you're a bit. You're about.
Your eyes are twinkling.
You're about.
We wouldn't distort anybody's policy.
You're about as liberal as the Islamic State when it comes to this. And there was a real ignorance because of Key Stage 1 kids, that's up to 7 now, are already taught about relationships. It's happening now.
Let's move on. Prince Charles, he's been defending himself after a biography claimed that he'd have a short and ugly kingship.
Well, he will. He's 66 now. She's going to go on for some time. He's going to be like...
Well, hang on. He's going to be like his mother. He might go on for another 30 years.
He'll be like Edward VII. He'll get a few years. But this Catherine Meyer biography, it's disputed by the palace, but nevertheless, it's kind of put a cat amongst the pigeons. And he does come across as pretty petty as a person.
What's interesting as well, the palace unusually wrote a letter to the Times taking issue with the idea that he's going to be
private secretary William Nye.
Yeah, and the letter was incomprehensible, of course, because it was written by someone from the palace who don't speak in the language the rest of us speak in. I didn't really understand it, but we sort of thought we knew what they meant, saying he understands the limits of constitutional monarchy. And effectively, I think they were saying his campaigning on issues from architecture to genetically modified food will stop when he's king, because otherwise it's going to be quite tricky doing the king's speech. My government will massively expand genetically modified food over my dead body.
Let's go back to school.
He needs
Miley
to.
in class. She's she's already had a frosty reception at the school gates, hasn't she?
She thinks so.
She tweeted a letter that had been put into the kids' book bags about encouraging people to give some money for a joint present. She changed the names and everything to make it anonymous, and then tweeted that her daughter would like a unicorn for her birthday.
Mylene, no class. Everybody in that school that she's mocked publicly will know who those kids are, know who those parents are. When other parents took it up with her, she said, let's talk about this in private. Well, no class. You didn't talk about it in private when you put it out on Twitter and Instagram.
It was funny, though.
I laughed my head off. And actually,
mocking those other kids.
She's
mocking their parents, isn't she?
Mocking the kids.
And she's talking about the modern tyranny of the school party for children. The goodie bags, which I know some of my friends say they're so expensive and they're frightened if they don't provide expensive ones. Their children are going to be mocked. And now these parents wanted cash to buy the child a Kindle. Buy your own child a Kindle. Don't expect the mums of other kids to buy
Hang
your
on,
Kindle.
hang on.
I've got a lot of sympathy with what she did.
Yeah, as a parent, when my kids have gone to parties, if somebody said they would like money because they'd buy something, I'm relieved instead of having to go out and find a
we've
find a
sometimes
present.
done joint presents in our class, and I've always been... It's only a £5 in our school.
Kevin just never got invited to parties.
What I especially liked was the fact that the letter was only addressed to ladies. Clearly, there are no dads at that time.
Yeah, well...
or only the ladies do the tedious stuff like present buying.
Let's not forget, Miley Class knew this would get extended because she has got 450,000 followers on Twitter, which is more than you.
Desperate for publicity, she is. She's got it, not always
right,
good.
Finally, it turns out that Derbyshire is a hotbed for devil worship. Who would have thought it? Bolsover.
Bolsover, where, of course, the local MP, Dennis Skinner, is known as the Beast of Bolsover. So hard, but
he said the 17. I probably just said the Satanists because it's less embarrassing admitting you're a Tory.
Yeah, I love that.
But the Church of Satan denounces this. It says no, we haven't got 17 members, so they probably are Tories.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they said they think it's a prank that they're.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of people just didn't know what to put.
Is he going to plug Dennis Skinner's book? It's very compelling. He might have had a hand in writing it.
Oh, might you know?
Have you told the taxman?
Right.
I declare everything, mate, unlike you.
To your people or things of the week now. Right, we're moving on. Katie Cutler, she is your up this week. This is you, Andrew. Is it?
No, it's not.
No, it's Kevin. Sorry.
It's the Angel of the North, Katie Cutler, who raised money, crowdsourcing and using Twitter and Facebook and so on, for Alan Barnes, a 4'6", disabled elderly guy, partially sighted, who was mugged by a tow rag in Gateshead. More than £250,000. It's absolutely wonderful. He's touched. He can restart his life. And
so it's for him to buy a new home and move elsewhere.
He didn't want to go back to that house because he thought he'd be scared. What a little sweetheart he is too, isn't he?
But I hope the tow rag who did it is cringing somewhere, waiting for that tap on the shoulder.
Yeah, good for her, and we wish him every happiness. So we're sending her up, but you are sending down this week off Gem.
That's right, the energy regulator, which is advising people to save money by have a packed lunch, cancel your gym membership. Well, people are pressed because of high fuel prices. Why doesn't Ofgem just do its job and get those prices down instead of being stupid, patronising,
It does seem a little inappropriate, though, that they're suggesting ways we could all cut our cloth separately.
Well, it's extraordinary, and for once I'm agreeing with Maguire completely. It reminds me of when a certain Tory minister said when people were cold in the north, wear a bobbly hat in bed.
Yeah. I'll have to write this down. This is one day you've agreed.
Yeah.
Right, on to you now, Andrew. We're sending off Gem down. You are sending up Harper Lee.
I think this is fantastic. As a great fan of To Kill a Mockingbird,
Indeed.
We never thought there was another book. It's now transpired. In fact, she wrote another book which was about the characters 15 years beyond
But she wrote
Kill a
it
Mockingbird.
first.
She wrote it first.
It's called Go Set a Watchman.
Yeah, and the publisher said, actually, you should write how they were earlier. She's now going to publish, the manuscript's been found, it's going to be published. It is going to be the publishing sensation of the year.
Well,
it'll win every prize, it'll top every bestseller.
Hang on.
You hope so.
Yeah, it's already setting sales records because it's topping 5 months out, topping pre-orders, but it may not be very good.
Well, we'll see. We'll send her up. Sending down, though, this is the warty pig.
Elvis.
When
I heard about the warty pig, I thought it was a reference. Yeah, when I heard about the warty pig, I thought it was a reference to Kevin Maguire. But actually, this is the Elvis, the warty pig, that killed his wife and children in Bristol Zoo.
I don't know if they were officially married.
But what's going on?
Lady friend.
It's not quite like that in the animal world, Andrew.
It should be. I'm all in favour of marriage.
Do you take this warthog to be your lawful wedded
warthog? What is going on at
Bristol
Zoo? Because there was a monkey that fell in an ornamental pond and it got eaten by an otter.
Are you on
and
drugs?
3 exotic birds.
Are you on
flew
drugs?
away. I come from Bristol. There's
you
something going wrong at that Bristol Zoo, you know.
The zoo say that they have the highest standards of animal welfare, education and conservation.
But not security. Well, how can they say conservation when the pig ate the other pigs?
You know, if you're not on drugs, you should be. Get down to the GP.
Thank you both so much for joining us for our review of the week. Don't forget you can catch Kevin and Andrew in action on the Sky News Press Preview along with the other paper reviewers as they take a first look at the day's papers every evening, 10:30 and 11:30. And Sky News, we must stop laughing about dead pigs. We'll be back for much more next week. So for now, it's goodbye from them.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. Goodbye.